Our guest today is entrepreneur, venture capitalist, financial columnist, and author James Altucher. By way of introduction, here are a selection of things people have said about James that you can find on the internet. Hedge fund hotshot, the best blogger of our generation. I'm going to kill him and eat his remains. An entrepreneurial savant. I hope you're not starting a cult, but if you are, I want in. An absolute moron, a genius. Also, by way of introduction, here are some of the things Altucher says about himself. I was standing right next to Steve Jobs in 1989. It was the closest thing I ever felt to being gay. I regret losing all of my money and then losing my house. I regret not spending more time with my kids when they were little, and I regret not saving the life of my dad when I could have. The summer of 2000, I lost $15 million in cash. I've loved and lost and loved again. I've tried over and over. I've been on a quest for the meaning of happiness since the age of 6. Welcome, James.
Thanks for having me on the show. It's glad to be here.
I'm very excited. As I told you earlier or before the show, my brother has a man crush on you, and after reading all that I've read of you in the last week or so, I'm developing one as well. But why would anyone want to eat you?
Well, I wrote this post that parents should not send their kids to college right now, that it's a horrible decision to make, and yet it seems to be such an automatic decision. Like we're brainwashed into thinking that the only way our children or even ourselves can have a happy life is if we have a college degree. And I think this is just one among many decisions we're brainwashed into thinking that people should rethink. So somebody wrote to me, actually many people wrote to me saying, I was just the worst person alive for suggesting this, and that, either I should be dead or the government should take away my kids or, many other things.
Well, and I think that I think the passion you inspire in others, culinary or otherwise, actually has a lot to do with what makes you exceptional, but we'll get to that in a bit. I wanted to start off with you. Some of my favorite writing of yours involves you trying to deconstruct the professional or even existential lessons to be learned from people in business or the arts that you respect or you've come across in your career. And it's clear that you have a deep respect for Steve Jobs. So it seems appropriate on this day to ask what lessons you learned from him.
Well, I think the important thing is that there's not just one path to success. Like Steve Jobs, you can count on many hands all of his flaws. And a lot of people like to actually put him, until today, put him down for various reasons and whatever. But I think Steve Jobs shows that through persistence and creativity, you can achieve success. Pixar being a great example. This was a company that was almost bankrupt on many occasions, and yet he continued to apply its technology until finally it was a success. And he did that by not only using his own creativity, but by hiring and paying enormous salaries to the most creative people he could find, until eventually Pixar became the massive success that it still is. Of course, owned by Disney now. And the same thing goes with Apple. The guy built Apple, but then he, failed. He learned how to deal with his own failure, which is something that many people don't know how to. They don't teach us that in college, how to fail. And he was ashamed, humiliated, embarrassed when he was kicked out of Apple. And, it took a long time, but eventually he came back to Apple. Again, he hired the best designers he could think of. He applied his own creativity, and he built Apple into the enormous success that it's going to continue to be.
Failure is a big theme of your work, and we'll get to it in a second. But as long as we're on the topic of mentors, I wanted to mention a couple others and see if you could give the quick 25-word version of the sort of essential lesson you learned from them. Financier Warren Buffett.
Excuse me, what do you want to know about Warren Buffett?
The essential lesson you learned from each of these people I'm about to mention.
I think Warren Buffett also is again an example of persistence. This guy has been doing nothing but investing for 55 years, And so over that amount of time, if you don't give up, and he's had some failures, over that time, if you don't give up, you're going to find success.
What about Jim Cramer?
Jim Cramer is a magician at promoting himself. Nobody does it better. You know, you can say any criticism in the world of Jim Cramer that you want, and there's a lot of criticisms of him, but he knows how to toot his own horn. And he once told me, when I was feeling particularly shy about going on television, he said, look, no one is going to publicize you if you don't do it. So he, you know, from him I learned that, and he's done a very good job of it.
What about the writer, Charles Bukowski?
Charles Bukowski, that guy has been through everything. He was an alcoholic, failed marriages, failed relationships, you know, was working 12-hour days at the post office, and yet he wrote every single day. So if you want to be a good writer, and he wrote in the most simple language as possible because he wanted people to be able to read him and understand him. So if you want to be a good writer or good at anything, no matter what obstacles come in your way, you have to just stick at it every single day. And Bukowski is a phenomenal example of that. How many people go from being practically a homeless alcoholic to being one of the most successful writers in history? There's millions of his books sold.
It seems to me that he's representative of a kind of triumvirate that comes up over and over again in your writing and your career, which is fear and honesty and failure and kind of their relationship. You say that fear is the enemy of honesty, fear of losing clients, fear of pissing off family, fear of going to hell, fear people won't like you, fear of being alone, that you have all of these fears, but that honesty is a superpower. You actually describe it as a superpower against that fear. Is that how does that work? What does that mean that honesty is a superpower against this fear that holds us back?
Well, let me just give you an example from my own experience. You know, I kind of started my blog about a year ago. Now, I had the domain name, and I was posting older articles on it that had to do with stocks or financial business or the economy or whatever. But I started being honest on my blog about a year ago, honest about my fears, my concerns, my worries, honest about my failures in the past, and I've had some enormous failures. And traffic on my blog probably went up, I'm not even exaggerating, 20,000% just by being honest. And every day people call me with opportunities. You know, just me being on your show, and I'm grateful for it, is an opportunity that resulted from me being more open and honest on my blog. Now, everyone can be honest, but a lot of people are afraid of it. So for instance, if you're a financial advisor, or if you're a stockbroker, or if you give any kind of advice whatsoever, like a Tony Robbins, for example, sometimes you can't always be honest because you feel like if I tell people this, and this, like I lost money, or I lost my wife, or I was crying on this one particular day during the financial crisis, then people are no longer going to respect me. They're no longer going to want to do business with me. But in fact, the reality is true. Because so much of your competition is dishonest most of the time, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're lying. It just means that their boundaries are tight around them, so they can't break out of those boundaries. If you go beyond those boundaries and are fully honest with your colleagues and your competitors and your potential customers, then you suddenly rise above the competition and everybody notices you.
Yeah, but tell me, I mean, you know, you've come to honesty recently, and it certainly has benefited you as a blogger and a writer. But you know, in the some 15 to 20 companies that you've started, and you know, your career as a hedge fund manager, you know, you say honestly that I was lying at that time. I wasn't honest. I wasn't honest with myself. I wasn't honest with other people, and most people in business aren't. Is it really an advantage in business, in your career, when everyone else is lying around you and you're not?
Yeah, there are some examples. For instance, you know, let's say, you know, and this has happened to me in the past. I've had a client where the specific needs that they had were not something I could easily fulfill. So I was happy to recommend my competitors to them, and I analyzed every competitor and what their skill sets were, and I said, here's the competitors that I think you should talk to. And what does that make me at that point? Not only does it make me honest, it makes me Google in a weird way. So why do you go to Google? You don't go to Google because there's any content on Google. You go to Google to find out what other websites you should go to given certain needs you have. Google by itself fulfills none of your needs. Like if you type in, I have cancer, Google will direct you to other sites. Google is not going to solve your cancer worries. So the same way, if you become the source where people know that they're going to get an honest and quality answer, then that's how they'll think of you. You're the source. Not the competitors, it's you. And that's what honesty brings. Honesty turns you into a sort of virtual human Google where people know that they can always come to you for the straight answer about where they should go to if you can't fulfill their needs. Plus, I just want to add, there's a voyeurism to honesty. So if I say, this is what happened to me on the 25 dates before I met my wife, people want to see that because for a voyeuristic aspect, it's like reality TV a little bit. It's supposed to be honest, but in fact it's not. It's heavily edited. I don't edit myself. So consequently, people know that they're going to get, sort of voyeurism unfiltered as well as this honesty when they go to my blog or when they hear me talk or whatever.
Is another benefit of your honesty a fearlessness?
Absolutely, because you have to be able to say, things like, when I was a child, my mother hit me, or, when I was on these dates, these bad things happened, and you have to be fearless that not only for yourself, but of course you have to make sure you're not going to harm anybody else, but you also have to assume that people are going to look down on you if you say certain things. If I say, nobody should go to college, then everyone who has paid $200,000 to get a college degree is going to hate me. So I have to be fearless, saying my opinion, and allowing people to hate me and not being overly worried about whether or not people hate me implies a certain fearlessness. Now, to be honest, I actually don't like when people hate me, and I take it somewhat personally, but that's part of the fearlessness too, that sometimes I'm not inhuman. Sometimes my own emotions I have to be able to handle.
This is why I think you're fascinating in the context of social capital. So often we interview these smooth, connected players with the right pedigree and the right suits who always say the right thing, and you're not that at all, which makes the social capital you've acquired over the year, which is substantial, and the doors you've opened, which are many, and the relationships you've made, all the more impressive and perhaps more instructive for kind of a general audience, because you've done it as an outsider with an unorthodox style. And I want to pull that style apart for a moment. Several critical elements of that style are illustrated by the story of how you got a meeting with the notoriously private hedge fund master Steve Cohen. Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So here's a case where persistence plays off, and this is a technique I've used in many different examples where you put yourself in front of a person and they might say no, or they won't respond. So, for instance, my very first company, and I'll get to the Stevie Cohen example, but my very first company that I sold, I wanted to sell it to Omnicom. So I got in front of the Omnicom head of acquisitions, and she liked the business, but we were too small at the time. And so, fine. I was disappointed, but every month then, I had the connection open. I was able to send her an update, and eventually, after a year of updates, she called me again and said, okay, we're interested. And things like that happen all the time. When you get in front of somebody, you might not get the response that you want, but suddenly they become aware of you. And then the more you send them updates, and if hopefully the updates are positive, the more likely they are to respond positively. So Stevie Cohen, I started sending him emails, and, he wasn't responding at all. I would send him, okay, last month I was up 2%. Then the next month I was up 3%. The next month I was up 1%. Finally, he wrote back, and he said, what's your IM? And it was a surprise. It was the first time he ever wrote back to me. And so I sent him my, instant message, and we started IMing. And then the next thing you know, I'm visiting him, and I'm pitching him on why I should work for him. In fact, he was almost pitching me on why I should work for him. And so eventually it didn't work out. I didn't end up working for him, but we were able to build up, an email relationship, and, potentially good things could have happened from that.
I know a little bit about Steve Cohen and how protected he is and how private he is. And, I think it's kind of exceptional that you went through variations of emails to actually get his email, and then you actually kind of found your way inside. Has that happened? Is that kind of a theme of your career, that you find these people who are connected to what you want to do, and you just go for it. You just do it where other people kind of spot it for it.
Yes, and I think it's a very important thing to remember. You can't just call someone and say, hey, I would like to meet you, because they're never going to respond. And, in fact, it's actually kind of rude. So if I call the CEO of Goldman Sachs and say, hey, Lloyd, I want to meet you, it's almost rude to him. He's a busy guy. So now, in addition to feeling like he has to respond to my email and say no, I'm trying to impose upon his time. What you have to do, and this is very important, and this has worked for me many times, is you have to give. You have to give something. So, for instance, when I met Jim Cramer, I didn't just write Jim Cramer and say, oh, Jim, here's 10 things. I didn't say, Jim, I'd like to meet you. I'll meet you for breakfast at 6 a.m. Instead, I had to actually give him, Jim, here's 10 ideas for articles you should write. I don't want to write them. You should write them. They're ideas I'm giving you for free. And Jim wrote back and said, no, why don't you write them? And then I started writing for TheStreet.com. Or another case, I wanted to work for a hedge fund manager. Instead of me just saying, hey, I want to work for you, I said to him, here's 10 trading systems that I've written the software for. I will give you all the code for free. You could just have them and enjoy yourself. And he wrote back and said, no, these are great trading systems. How about we meet? And he ended up allocating some of his own personal money for me to start trading every day. So when you give, you'll receive. And that's the only way you'll receive. People only want to make you money when you want to make them money. And again, that's part of honesty as well. People are always worried, oh, well, I can't give my ideas away. Listen, you'll have more ideas. If you practice your idea muscle every day, if you practice coming up with 10 good ideas a day, then your idea muscle starts to build in a way, the way money compounds. It builds exponentially. So you'll have a flood of ideas you can give to other people. And if you just start giving ideas every day to people, they'll respond. Some people will respond. Not everyone. You can't expect 20 out of 20 to respond. But 1 out of 20 is good enough if you're constantly coming up with ideas.
The importance of providing value is very clear, especially when meeting other people. And what's also clear in reading your writing is that you've pinpointed ideas as your own value, and you've created systems for, as you say, flexing that muscle and building it. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm talking about from the list that you create, and how you think about those lists and how they kind of go from a sort of general idea to something more concrete, to who you're going to connect around those ideas. I think that is actually, while some of it seems intuitive, I don't think other people have gone to the level that you have in kind of deconstructing what it means to create value from ideas.
Okay, so, it's very interesting because most people, I don't want to say most people don't have ideas, because everybody has ideas, but most people, it's very hard when you're working your 9-to-5 job to come up with, to keep your idea muscle fresh. And I call it a muscle because muscles atrophy. So if I stay in bed for a week, and I try to get up and start walking, I won't be able to walk because my leg muscles have atrophied. And so it's the same thing with the idea muscle. If you don't actively attempt to build your idea muscle, then it will atrophy. And it atrophies just as quickly as any other muscle in your body does. So what I typically do is I wake up early, and you don't have to wake up that much earlier than you normally do, but I wake up early, I take a pad, and I simply start coming up with ideas. It might be ideas about anything, ideas of people who I should try to have lunch with today, or ideas for businesses I want to start, or ideas for articles I want to write. But I don't just have an idea like, oh, I'm going to read a Wikipedia article today. The idea has to be more specific. What article do I want to read today in order to learn more about something? Or the idea just can't be, I'm going to write my own article today. I have to get specific. Well, I'm going to write about Steve Jobs today. Well, what about Steve Jobs? Well, how about how he made Breakout when he was 18 years old or 15 years old or whenever. So I try to when I'm coming up with these ideas, I try to drill down as specifically as possible. Not so much so that I'm actually writing the article right there, because at some point you have to back up and come up with the next idea, but that's how you keep the idea muscle active and how you build it. And again, over time, it builds to a phenomenal level. So what does it mean, a phenomenal level? Well, it means you'll never have writer's block, for instance, because you'll be able to sit down and you'll be able to write down your ideas, just straight off the top of your head. Or it also helps you as an entrepreneur. Let's say I wanted to sit down today and say, okay, I want to come up with 10 ideas for businesses I'm going to start. I'll start listing the ideas, but I won't just list, I'm going to make an e-commerce site that sells something. Maybe I'll get more specific. What am I going to sell? Well, how am I going to make it? Well, how am I going to use Groupon to help me sell these vitamins that I want to sell? How am I going to, spec out the idea to send to, people I outsource to in Kenya, and so on. You get as specific as possible with each idea without getting too much in the nuts and bolts that you can't go on to the next idea until you have developed your 10 ideas for the day.
Is that all related to, and actually maybe it's not, but you describe success as a sexually contagious disease. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Yes, well, think about the first time you wanted to be successful at something. So it's not just because you wanted to have some money in your pocket, or it's not because you wanted to be able to provide for your family and that's the first time you realized you wanted success. The reality is you wanted to have success because you wanted to have sex with other women or men or whatever. So the fact that we want to be kind of the most attractive mate for our spouse or potential spouses or potential sexual partners drives us to success. So, when I was younger, I wanted to write a novel because I thought writing a novel would attract women to me. Or later on, I wanted to have a TV show because I thought doing that would attract women to me. And finally, later on, I wanted to build and sell a business. Why? Because I wanted to attract women to me. It's only later you realize that that's maybe one small aspect of success, but really a much better way of viewing success is a way to buy your freedom. And so freedom doesn't necessarily mean, I can relax on a yacht in the Caribbean. Freedom means I now have time to pursue things that make me happier. And so what might make me happier is relaxing a little more and not being so stressed. Or what might make me happier is, pursuing spiritual pursuits a bit more, which when you're raising a house, you don't necessarily have time for, but when you're older and hopefully have more freedom, you have time for. And that's an important way that people can be happy. So success sort of evolves in a person from being a sexually contagious disease to being a means towards freedom, to being a means towards exercising the spiritual muscle, which also atrophies inside people.
That reminds me of one of the ideas that keeps coming up and that you're truly passionate about, and that you impress upon readers as the key to your success, what you call the daily practice. Talk about what that is and how you came to realize that was the foundation of for you, and you argue everyone else's, what you might call optimal functioning.
Yeah, so I've had many problems in the sense that, I've had businesses that have failed. I've gone completely broke. I've lost a house. I've lost a marriage. I've had lots of different roller coasters in my life that I would just as soon forget about. But one thing I do remember is that each time I was on the floor, and literally on the floor, wondering how can life possibly continue after these events, only one thing has helped me. And this is not based on anything, I've read or studied or anything like that, but just what actually did get me off the floor so I could try again and live again and be happy again. And that's what I call this daily practice when I actually quantify it. So there's basically 4 legs to this practice. One is physical. You can't succeed if you're sick. So if you're physically ill or not in shape or eating junk food all the time, you're not going to be able to succeed. It's just not possible. Someone who is constantly ill will not be able to succeed at that point. The other thing is emotional health. So if you're having a series of bad relationships, or if you're constantly arguing with your family or constantly arguing with your spouse, or God forbid cheating on your spouse or whatever, you're not going to have the emotional health to go ahead and find the energy to build a business or to succeed or to be happy. The next thing is mental health, and that's this idea muscle that I've discussed. You have to be able to not only generate ideas, but have confidence that you're generating good ideas. And that doesn't happen overnight. That requires practice. Just like physical exercise doesn't get you in shape overnight. It's over a 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 6-year period. And then finally, spiritual health. You have to be able to know that there's going to be some points that are so difficult that you just say to yourself or to a higher power or to whoever, I can't do this. Help me out. I give up. And I'm not even talking about a God or anything. Just having a notion of surrender exercises that spiritual muscle. And of course, also gratitude. You know, we're all grateful that we're alive today using Apple products, for instance, and we're sad that Steve Jobs is not alive to enjoy it with us. So we're grateful to be alive. So all 4 of these legs are what I call the daily practice when they're coming together. They have to be working in conjunction in order for one to climb above that floor that you've put yourself on, which has been thrust on you, either failure or poverty or losing a home or relationship or anger or whatever. You know, anger being just a manifestation of fear.
I find it interesting that you're a former computer programmer. You're a terrific chess player, an entrepreneur, and a finance guy. You've made your way through the world with a faith in logic in the pragmatic world of business and the cutthroat world of finance. And now suddenly your writing sounds more like Deepak Chopra than, say, Peter Drucker. How did that happen?
Well, you know, computer science, I loved computers, and I majored in computer science and then went to graduate school in computer science. My first company was heavily based on my computer science background. My first jobs were all based on that. And yet, at the end of the day, you know, I think part of it is the success is a sexually contagious disease. I didn't see many women doing computer science, so I wanted to do something that, you know, I'm not the most good-looking guy, so I needed something else to help me meet people. So I started exploring, and I was passionately interested in, you know, writing fiction, then creating a TV show. I worked for HBO for several years, and then I finally started a company building websites for entertainment companies. So I, bit by bit, made a transition, but I used my computer skills to help me make that transition. And, you know, everybody is passionately interested in something for several years at a time. It's hard to be passionately interested in something forever. So computer science I was interested in for a while, but not forever. And the last time I programmed a computer was probably about 12 years ago. Unfortunately, because I wish now I could program. It's almost as if I've had a computer lobotomy, like I'm not able to program at the moment, the last time I tried.
Well, I guess my point was, you know, some people might say, well, look, you know, you've made your millions, you've lost, but you're definitely probably up at this point. You're kind of afforded the luxury of now talking in this kind of what seems like an ephemeral way about success being more about happiness and, you know, focusing on spirituality and so on. How do you sort of answer the charge that this is really, you know, you're able to do this because you already have money in the bank, and for those of us, you know, who don't, there are sort of more street smart, harder, pragmatic lessons that we need to learn?
Well, again, you know, whether or not I have money, it's the times when I've been like dirt poor, broke, agonizing, divorced or separated, and just trying to get off the ground. It was at those points that I needed someone to throw me the safety line or whatever. And spirituality is a part of that. Spirituality is almost a bad word. Like we're Americans, so we don't really, we're freedom from religion, freedom from spirituality in a sense. But again, I think it's not so much the word spiritual. I'm not looking for any spirits to help me out, but the idea that to surrender to either this creative superpower inside of myself or to surrender to some higher power that I'm not aware of, that's what I really mean by spirituality. It can be coming from inside of yourself, outside of yourself, doesn't matter. It doesn't mean an old man in a beard. It doesn't mean super conscious. It could just mean I'm surrendering to the creative force inside of myself that I hardly ever use and just say, look, I've done all I can. That's it. I give up. I need help. And knowing that and having confidence that by learning to surrender and give up in that way, you will get the help that you asked for. And I've gotten that help when I've had negative in the bank. So that's really why I'm convinced it's part of this 4 legs of success, whether you have, $1 billion or $0. And I'm somewhere in the middle, probably closer to the $0, but it still helps me every day when I'm trying to figure out what direction my life is going and how I can help people and how I can achieve the most with the years that I have left.
How does this? Tell me, in your new book, I Was Blind, But Now I See. You talk about the practice and you talk about these failures and the lessons you've learned and sort of give the evolution of how you got to this place. And critical to that is this several chapters on why you should quit your job or what happens if you quit your job. And gaining this freedom that you're talking about. How did you come to this? And is it a dicey proposition to tell everyone out there that they should they need to become a free agent or independent, or is there something going on that we don't know about how the economy is changing that this is actually a more secure path or route?
Well, there's several answers. One is we've been taught since an early age that corporate safety, corporate America, big corporate America is safe. So if you work for General Electric, you're never going to lose your job. You're going to retire with a pension and with a life savings, and life will be good and a gold watch, and life will be good when you're 65 years old. Well, there's really a couple of points there. We've sort of learned in the past 3 years, even 10 years, that that's a myth. So I met a guy the other day. He worked at General Motors for 38 years. Now, he wasn't in top management, and he wasn't in the union. He was in middle management. So what happened to him? When GM went bankrupt, he lost his job, he lost his life savings, he lost his pension, and fortunately he had some money tucked away, but corporate safety is a total myth. So if you're trying to rise up through the ranks of your company and hope that that's going to help you achieve happiness and freedom, that's just not true. It's just a myth. So the second thing is, when you work a job, so much of your money is taken out via taxes. Much better, if you can do it, is to build a business, to kind of hustle to have multiple streams of income, and that helps you with different, you have expenses building your business, so that helps you manage the tax situation. And in general, you feel good about yourself creating for multiple companies or people, so you're not dependent on any one person. And I think we've seen the hustle a lot more in these past 3 years. 1 or 2 person businesses has spiked up, just as unemployment has spiked up. So we're seeing people leave the corporate workforce and start 1 person businesses because they realize it's been a myth all along, the idea of corporate safety. Not only that, it's really hard to deal with a boss. Most bosses don't know how to manage people. So I don't like doing it, and most people I know don't like doing it. And now that doesn't mean you should go immediately from your corporate job at General Electric to being, the most successful entrepreneur in the world. It's a process. but the process begins with doing the daily practice, and I can guarantee within 6 months of that, you'll be able to make the jump. You'll have the ideas, you'll have the execution ability, you'll have the network, and you'll be able to jump from that corporate American job to your own reality that you create and not some corporate manager.
So the answer is entrepreneurship? Is that the answer? Is that as an alternative to
entrepreneurship or lifestyle businesses where you're doing consulting or you're building income that suits your lifestyle. And so it might mean building a business where you sell products or services and have employees and so on, or it might just mean I'm going to consult for 3 or 4 people. It's going to take up 30 hours of my week, and I'm going to be happy doing it. And I don't necessarily need to grow a big business to be happy. I'm also going to downsize, perhaps. You know, a lot of people who get caught up in the corporate rat race, they also need the best dishwasher, and they need the white picket fence, and they need a nice home, and they need the nicest cars. We don't need these things. You know, we can be perfectly happy with second best on a lot of these things. It's kind of this keeping up with the Joneses mentality that corporate America also gives us. They give us that on purpose, so we feel obliged to continue working for corporate America. I mean, think about the myth of owning a home. You have to own a home to have roots, to be happy. A lot of people make that lifestyle choice that they have to own a home. But the reality is, when you own a home, suddenly you've become less flexible. You can't move to find the ideal job for yourself. You owe the bank suddenly an enormous amount of money. The banking system's $1 trillion industry because you owe them money. And that continues on and on for everybody who believes in the myth that owning a home gives you the roots that you need to be happy. So, again, it's not so much being an entrepreneur. It's sort of managing your expectations, you know, coming up with ideas, having a sense of surrender or spirituality, being in good health so that people around you recognize that and want to have you around them, and also being emotionally healthy so that doesn't bog you down while you're trying to find multiple sources of income. And by the way, a lot of people have bad relationships with their boss, so that keeps them from being emotionally healthy. They need to leave those situations.
So, and it seems to me one of the more tactical considerations of this sort of work life that you're talking about, something that you would seem to have mastered is developing this thing that they call a personal brand, and getting out there. I mean, you do it on a scale that most won't, but we're getting questions from people who want to know about how did you develop the brand to the point where you found yourself on public speaking and, you know, as a TV talking head, and is there anything that you learned from that you can pass on to other people to do it even on a more local scale?
Yes, and it's actually incredibly easy. And let's take apart the word personal brand, because what is a brand? So companies like Coca-Cola spend billions of dollars on branding. So when you see a Coca-Cola commercial, for instance, you might see a beautiful girl on roller skates who she's done with her roller skating and now she drinks Coca-Cola, and you see the sunlight and the fizz is going into the sky. It's this amazing picture of beauty, and I want that life too. So Coca-Cola is branding themselves that way. The reality is that's not what Coca-Cola is. Coca-Cola is this brown drink that has the equivalent of 16 spoons of sugar in it and various dyes in it. And, you know, so Coca-Cola has to lie in order to brand themselves. And I'm not saying they're doing this in a mischievous way. No accusations to them. That's how they make a living. But I want to separate out the words personal from branding. I think a personal brand is when you start to lie. Focus first on the personal, and you beat out all the competition instantly. So just being honest, being yourself, doing the work, applying that daily practice for just a few months, and your personal will come to life more than it ever has been before. You'll be honest with the people around you, and that automatically beats out all of the competition, because the rest of your competition is too slick, too dishonest, too much focused on their brands, you're not focused on that anymore. And when you come up with honest, sincere ideas for people and you give rather than expecting to take, then you've suddenly separated yourself out from 99% of the competition. You win. And it's that easy to do it.
Can you put some flesh on those ideas by giving an example, showing it in practice?
Yeah, sure. When I write right now, okay, and I'm speaking about it in terms of blog, but I can also speak about it in terms of business. But when I write right now, I am always honest with my personal stories. I don't just say 10 ways to be a better person. I say, here's what happened to me when I was a bad person. I lost all my money. I was a horrible investor. I lost my marriage. I lost my home. I was lying on the floor. I have one story where I wrote an ad on Craigslist pretending to be a psychic just so I could have people write back to me and I could communicate with people. But at the end of the day, what really helped me was putting this daily practice in place, being honest, and then, in the case of this blog, starting to share my honesty on this blog. And then before you know it, I started getting incoming calls. Hey, here's my business. Could you invest in it? Here's, can I do anything for you? Can I be an intern for you? Would you like to speak at my event? We would love to have you speak at my event and pay some money. And I wasn't even asking for this. All I had to do was be honest on my blog, and suddenly it separated my blog from all the other financial blogs and self-help blogs and motivational blogs and so on. It's actually increased my business life by telling the most horrific, horrible stories about myself. Actually, telling people how I lost millions of dollars was enough to get people to hire me to do things.
And do you think that the modern business organization is built on a structure that absolutely doesn't allow that, where business is not personal and you don't bring those sort of things to the table? At least down low on the organizational chart. Do you think that businesses in general, or people who work at companies, can use that to their benefit as well?
Absolutely. Everybody who works in a company should be thinking in this way that I'm describing, because sincere voices always rise to the top. And if they don't, then that's not the business for you to be in. But, when I worked at HBO, the television network, I was like a junior programmer in the IT department. But what I really wanted to do was have a TV show. So first I pitched to them special things they should do on their website that I could do, which sort of seemed like TV shows. And then I pitched directly to their television department, here's an idea I would like to do for your television show, for TV. And they gave me the opportunity to do it. They paid for a pilot for me to go out and do. So I was honest. I stated what I really wanted to do, which was not to be a junior programmer, but to actually be more on the television side. I gave away ideas, and I came up with good ideas, and they gave me the opportunity to do it. And I was grateful for that. It's just specifically, my idea was, and this kind of came out of my programming, but my idea was, what are people up to at 3 o'clock in the morning in New York City on a Tuesday night? Because if you're out at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday night, there's a reason for it, and it's not a good one. So, I did that for HBO's website for 3 years, and I pitched it as a TV pilot, and they let me do it. It never aired, but I was able to have fun doing it.
We're almost out of time, or actually we are. My last question is, your journey has been fascinating because you've done so many more things and you've failed so much. And I say that as a positive because I think you learn certain things through failure and that kind of experience that you can't learn anywhere else. A certain kind of tacit knowledge, which you clearly have, and I see in your writing you're trying to express. What's the next stage for you?
I don't know, and I would really, I think every day about that. Every day right now I'm really enjoying writing on my blog, jamesaltucher.com, and I have as a discipline, I write every single day. I don't know how long that will last, but I sort of feel that as this blog gets bigger, more opportunities will come, and I hope that the next step for me is that I can continue to help people more and more through my blog as I build traffic. Every month is bigger than the month before. Today will be probably my biggest traffic day ever, and I'm excited about that. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, you're a fascinating man, Mr. Altucher, and I thank you for taking the time to talk to us. For more from James, go to his exceptional blog at www.jamesaltucher.com, and there you can pick up his latest book, which I really enjoyed reading. I Was Blind, But Now I See. James, I hope to talk to you again, and I really do appreciate the time. So thank you all, and have a great day.
Thanks, Tal.